On this channel, there has been much talk about the conditions that Rusyns faced in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This is the period of 1867 to 1918, when the kingdom officially becomes a dual monarchy. The regions in this new governmental system primarily being divided into two kingdoms, as the name suggests, with the Austrians' domain being that of Bohemia, Galicia, Bukovina, Dalmatia, and the modern areas of Austria, Slovenia, and a small part of northern Italy. The other kingdom being the lands of the crown of Saint Stephen. This name denominated all the areas of the dual monarchy that were under so-called Hungarian control. An important point here that you must understand is that this did not just refer to the Kingdom of Hungary. The lands of the crown of Saint Stephen also included the Kingdom of Croatia-Slavonia, of which the Hungarians technically had control over. This dual monarchy is also not what it appears to be at face value. All of the big decisions, especially in the relation to foreign policy, were made in Vienna. This is not to demean the eastern half of the dual monarchy, however, as Hungarians from this new formation gained more authority over their historic lands than at any time in the past 3 centuries. In this video today, we will be primarily looking at how exactly the lands of Subcarpathian Rus were administered in this period. It is in this hope that you can better understand how Rusyns lived, but also how undivided Rusyns in modern-day Zakarpattia, the Prešov region, and also Marmurej actually were. In front of you is a map of every county in the lands of the Crown of Saint Stephen, as I showed before. As you can see, there is no specific Carpathian Rus county or kingdom within this empire. This area, in fact, was primarily divided up and ruled into 7 counties, from left to right: Spiš, Saros, Zemplin, Ung, Bereg, Agoska, and Maramuros, or Maramurej. Just these 7 counties contained the vast majority of all Rusyns that lived within Hungary. Most of these were around since literally the 1200s AD, somewhat around the time that Hungarians formally took control of the borderlands between Poland and the Kievan Rus in its north. These borders changed little over the following 700 years. With these counties, you also had further subdivisions called districts. A good example for you being the county of Saros, because of course I'm a homer for my beloved Blazov and Tiki Potok. Saros County was divided further into 7 districts in the Austria-Hungary period. Being an American, I am horrendous at pronunciation, so here are the districts before you with an old map of the area. These counties varied in how Rusyn dominated they were. For example, the farthest west county containing at least some area of historical Carpathian Rus, Spiš, was overwhelmingly made up of Slovaks and Germans, with the population of Rusyns in 1900 making up only 8.3% of the county's population. As what you might expect, further east you went, the more likely the counties were Rusyn-dominated. If we slide to the right over back into Saros County, the population of Rusyns in 1900 was 19.5%. Then once again, to illustrate my point, slide again, skipping over Zemplin County because Hungarian officials seemed to have a stroke the day they were making these counties' borders. Which frankly, they probably had a good geographical reason, but anyways, we reach Ung County. Rusyns in this county were a plurality, with 36.4% of the population, followed by Hungarians at 30.2%. Also, another thing to understand is that while, for example, Rusyns did make up 1/5 of Saros County, these Rusyns weren't spread out equally at all among the towns. Generally speaking, the further away from the Carpathians a county would go, the less Rusyns there was. In many cases, you would have examples of the whole north of the county being populated by Rusyns in Rusyn villages, with bigger Slovak or Hungarian settlements to its south. So now we have a rough basis on where exactly Rusyns lived and administrative divisions. But how exactly were these counties governed? To really understand this, we need some historical background, further back in time before Austria-Hungary was created. Each county was governed by 2 main figures: the county head and the deputy county head. A county head at this time would have a nice castle as his base for operations, as well as being in charge of all the taxes, fees, and other economical responsibilities of his people. One could say this person was a feudal lord of the county. Once we cross into the 13 and 1400s, the deputy county head would be the one to primarily administer the region. Don't be mistaken. This wasn't some Tokugawa shogunate era dynamic where the emperor has no real power. The simple fact of the matter is that for many of these county heads, they had much more important jobs to do. Whether it be in the royal court or other government aspects, they played a much larger role in the kingdom as a whole. These county heads were also not necessarily tied down to their county. In practice it would have been a little harder, but the king could lawfully recall these people at any time. Fast forward over the centuries, and many more low-level nobles were included in the administration and judicial workings of the counties. Now, if I were to cover every nook and cranny of this stuff, it would make the video go on an hour in length. So to close with the most important aspects on this topic, the Act of 1870 regarding municipalities could be considered a defining change in how counties were run. No longer could only nobles run the county. It was, in theory, open to anyone who had the political skill and connections. The counties would survive until after World War I, where, of course, the Treaty of Trianon divided the Kingdom of Hungary into now separate states. All of this is to say that there is no distinction of Rusyns like how there is today. Many of these counties are now in fact split between countries. You can see this with the Ung county between Ukraine and Slovakia, and Marmuresh between Ukraine and Romania. Remember that when thinking about Rusyns as a whole. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at how Rusyn lands were administered in Austria-Hungary.